Hello, welcome to Fascism on Film. You can find us on fascismonfilm.com, and we are on Apple Podcasts and other podcast venues. And my name is James Kent, and along with me is Teal Minton. Hello, Teal.
Hello, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. No, we're talking to you, listener. This week, we are going to talk about 2019's Oscar-winning film, not for Best Picture. It was nominated for Best Picture, but won Best Adapted Screenplay, is Taika Waititi's Jojo Rabbit. That is based on a book
Yes.
I've not read. It's called Caging Skies by Christine Leunens. And I'm not sure, I'll be honest, if that is a straight drama version of events and that he took more of a darkly comic look at it.
He took more of a comic look at it. The main thing, the book is a lot darker, and the main thing is that the book has a very different ending than the movie.
Oh, well, that'll be interesting to maybe talk about at some point in our discussion.
I've not read it, but I did read up on the changes that were made from the book, and yeah, a completely different ending that is much darker, more depressing. The movie really goes for something lighter, redemptive even, and joyous. This idea that survival is kind of the ultimate act of resistance, and the film ends with them dancing to David Bowie.
I can almost hear the sort of scorn in your voice. And that's, by the way, I had forgotten that. Now, with these movies that we talk about on the show, they're all films that we've seen. And typically, before while taping the program, we do a rewatch. Sometimes, not always, and it's probably, I would say, in not all cases, but in most cases, it's you, Teal, that are seeing something maybe for the first time.
Yeah.
But there's been a few things that, like for instance, Hans Westmar, that you made me watch. That I was seeing for the first time. But in this case, we'd both seen the film. And I saw it back in the theaters. It was actually the last film that I saw before things shut down for COVID.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I hadn't seen it again. I gotta be honest, it was not a film that I fell in love with. These sort of modern and maybe darkly comic takes on the Holocaust. I don't know if it's sort of a Holocaust movie, I guess.
It's not a Holocaust movie.
Not,
it just barely touches on that. And it kind of, I don't know, I have very mixed feelings about this film. There's things in it I think work pretty well. The film is controversial. A lot of critics thought that it was too light and kind of too much of a Wes Anderson type of view of Nazis.
I mean, where I was going with this is there's a film that we have not discussed, and we may have dropped a mention of it, but of course it's the Roberto Benigni movie from 1998, right? Life is Beautiful. And that one is a very controversial movie on the way that the Holocaust was depicted, in that there was humor in it, and it seems like that's something where it just rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think this film did a similar thing with certain critics. Other people really appreciated it and thought, oh, this is sort of a childlike view of these things, and that's why it's softened and cutesy and sort of quaint. But other people feel like that it softens the subject too much and takes away the critical power of the film in a way.
Yeah, it's almost like the filmmaker, Waititi, leaned on what he was known for, as doing comedy, and that seemed to be his easiest way for him to approach the material versus the real stretch as a director, which would have been, maybe there's some, a couple of laughs in it, but to take a harder look at a story, I don't think he was the filmmaker who could do that.
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't. I mean, it's not, and I would say it's not necessarily an anti-fascist film. It's an anti-hate film. And it really focuses on hate as being the animating idea behind fascism. And it's really about this kid who hates Jews, and over the course of the story learns that Jews are not that bad, and he actually falls in love with this girl and is redeemed through that. And so it has this sort of personalist model of what fascism is, that it's about people who are bad in their hearts. and that if you fix their hearts, you will fix fascism. And so it sort of ignores the machinery of fascism and focuses instead on the individual. And so it's sort of like saying, well, all Nazis are filled with hate, and if they could just meet some Jews, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened.
Okay, I'm going to stop you because I don't believe personally. I think this is a very interesting approach to the movie, but I don't believe that at all. I think there's a different aspect that we haven't got into here, and I know we're just sort of like kind of jumping around here into this film, and this is interesting that we might have one of our first real debates on a show, but. Setting the stage here, we are at end stage for Nazi Germany, World War II. Okay,
Yes.
German people are like in shambles in the war at this point, where they're losing. You have enemies from all sides starting to close in, and that they're already, starting to look at the Hitler Youth, as they say, that they've been using their minds to corrupt. Well, they've run out of soldiers, and it's going to be starting to soon, to the point where kids are going to have to maybe fight. And I think that you're seeing a lot of cynicism even in the Nazi rank and file in this movie. And like Sam Rockwell's a great example where, he doesn't really, his heart is not in it anymore. But the kids, and from this kid's perspective, the kid that you said, this kid hates Jews. Well, this kid has grown up under fascist rule and fascist indoctrination in education in every aspect. He is the model, Nazi. And he worships Hitler and he believes all of the propaganda. And in his mind, he's never met a Jew, right? Because at this point, think about how old this kid is. Most of the Jews are already being round up at this point. I mean, it's 44. So in Germany, there haven't been a lot of Jews in his time. So
he's 10 years old.
Yeah, so they're a boogeyman, right? And he's a kid who is very impressionable, moldable, and he, of course, has the virtuous mom, played by Scarlett Johansson, and she's been lying to him on several fronts, just like the German people have been lied to, and just how like the Nazis are lying to there's a lot of covering up to protect, I guess, things. So, the father, who may be a deserter, he's actually somewhere undisclosed in the underground somewhere.
Yeah, and we don't really know.
There's a daughter that died, and yet we're not really sure like why it is that the Nazis don't know that the daughter is dead. That's a little bit weird because it comes to
Yeah, they seem to know everything, but somehow missed that one detail.
Yeah, and it may be that they were keeping it possibly secret because the other it's not like so much of a shocking reveal. If you're listening to this show, I don't think you're worried about spoilers because we are just talking about movies that have existed all the time, and that's just sorry. But there is a Jewish girl that the mom has been hiding up in the attic, and of course Jojo discovers it because he's injured. Like he's sent off to like a Hitler Youth training, and he's injured, and so he can't really be a soldier anymore. And so
he blows himself up. He throws a grenade, and it blows up at his feet, and it injures him and puts scars on his face, and he has a limp for the rest of the movie.
It is pretty. I have to say that opening part I had a lot of hope for the movie that it would be kind of hilarious.
Yeah, that opening part is really, I think, in a way, the bravest part of the film. And the opening sequence, it starts with a scene with him talking to his imaginary friend Hitler. And then it goes into this sort of Beatles fandom and sort of shows fascism as something that people are fans of. And they're fans of Hitler. And it sort of has this, it actually has the Beatles song in German, but
and it's kind of genius. I mean, it's definitely a great way to start it.
I think that's the best part of the movie, actually, is that opening sequence. And I think even going into the Hitler Youth bit, it's very funny, but it also is really dark. And it sets up the character in an interesting way in terms of the other kids are even more devoted than Jojo is. And they ask Jojo to show that he's a killer by killing a rabbit. And this is where he gets his name from, is he's unable to kill the rabbit. And so we see right from the beginning that even though he's been brought up in this, he actually kind of has a good heart and is a compassionate person.
Again, it's interesting is that, we're talking about fascism on film, and so it's maybe is it not the opportunity to spend time picking apart a movie. But there are some things that bothered me when I first watched the movie, and they bothered me again the second time. And I think they weaken the movie. And one is that Taika Waititi plays Hitler.
Yes.
He doesn't look like Hitler. I know he's a cartoonish version of Hitler, but why it falls flat for me is that because Jojo is so devoted to Hitler,
Yeah.
and he is such a fan, I would believe that he would know every aspect about Hitler, right? And
Right.
that the Hitler that would talk to him would be really more like,
More serious.
yes. And so one thing that bothers me, again, I'm always a person who likes weird little things can throw me out of a movie. And what throws me out of this movie is on more than one occasion when he's having interactions with Hitler, Hitler offers Jojo Rabbit a cigarette.
Yes.
And of course, that's ridiculous, right? That this grown person's offering this little kid a cigarette. But what bothers me about it is because it is well known and documented, and other movies touch on this. Hitler was an anti-smoking freak.
Mm-hmm.
He hated it. He thought it made you a weak person. He thought it was not a good habit. And so the way I see it is a little kid like Jojo, who is such a Rabbit fan, Rabbit fan, not Rabbit, but he would know that Hitler didn't like smoking. And I'm like, does Tatiki Waititi, does he not know that? Like, I was like, it just seemed wrong.
I think actually he specifically didn't watch videos of Hitler because he didn't want to. He wanted to create his own character, and so I think he.
But did he not know history? I mean, that's like a basic history thing. And I know, so I know, like it's somewhat farcical, but like there are those kind of elements. It really, even when a farce or a comedy, can they stick in me and they bother me.
And we've talked about this before, is whether, comedy is even up to this with To Be or Not to Be or The Great Dictator, whether comedy can even contain this subject. And by turning the Hitler smoking thing sort of makes a mockery of the character in a way that makes that we don't take him quite as seriously. And so I think for the audience kind of minimizes the threat of Hitler. And the fact it isn't really until the end that he gets angry with Jojo and we see kind of him giving it more of a Hitler type speech. But prior to that, it's a cute, safe Hitler in a way.
And of course, Jojo doesn't have his father, so it's a father figure. But the Hitler part really doesn't work for me. And thankfully, it doesn't overwhelm the movie.
Yeah.
But it is something that bothers me. It's the weakest part of the film for me. And like I said, the film director, he decided these choices and he decided to play that character, and it just felt a little egocentric.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And then, this film, for whatever reason, it won, best adapted screenplay. And it always questions, I know it's just the Oscars or whatever, but I'm like, I just didn't see this as the kind of strong movie that should win an award like that. And this other thing that bothered me, and again, when I think of like it getting praise for its screenplay, and this is maybe on the direction, there is a visual cue in the movie that happens. Because it felt so directed so obviously, I knew what that visual cue was going to mean somewhere later in the movie, and it came as no surprise because I just was like, oh, I know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, and that is kind of the movie's boldest choice, which is, I think we can just reveal this, is that the mother is hanged for being in the resistance and she's handing out free Germany little pamphlets and is hanged for it. And leading up to that, we see people hanging in the town square, and we see just their feet and the little tags stapled to them. And then for a few shots throughout the film, we see her feet also. and Jojo looking at her feet. And then we have this scene later in the film where he's following this butterfly along the ground, and he looks up and sees her feet hanging there, and he hugs her feet. And it's a visual cue. It's set up. And as you said, it's kind of obvious, and it's leading us towards this moment. And I actually find the moment a little bit manipulative. Like, he's looking at the butterfly, which seems like just a device to get him to not look up and see her until the last moment.
Yeah, well, this is the stuff. This is something that not necessarily on our discussions here in Fascism and Film, but with some of the movies, as we've debated which films we should talk about, not talk about, these are things that you have problems with, say, the work of Steven Spielberg.
Yes, exactly.
Is that sometimes he can, yes, just because he's a master at moving the camera and doing things, he can be manipulative. And
Yeah.
it is something that I felt very manipulative, but I also called so early. And it will, again, when you show these people hanging in the square, you get that feeling that we're going to revisit that. And then once you see that, because he focuses very much on the shoes, and then we start to see her shoes, and they're very distinguished. It's a very interesting costume design. It was actually also nominated, I believe. I like the costumes in the film.
Yeah.
I also like the cinematography. I mean, I like a lot about this.
I like the production design. I like the casting. The acting is all good. Yeah.
Now, that's not to say I didn't hate the movie. I didn't dislike it. And I felt, actually, for a movie that sort of, I think people several years ago thought maybe a little bit funnier. Well, after going through COVID and then also now being under the kind of, say, leadership in this country that we are now, you watch a movie like this and it's not really funny at all.
No, it's not. It's not really funny at all, and I think it was made intentionally to sort of at the time that it was made was in response to rising right-wing populism sort of around the globe, and because we do see that happening in Europe now too, and so I think it was sort of asking that question of how do we fall into this? How do we get caught up in this? And what does it do to us ultimately, which is that it sort of destroys us.
Well, it is easy to forget a little bit that when this movie came out, the person who's in charge now was the person who was in charge then.
Yes.
We only got a brief 4-year reprieve, and it never really felt like that person went away.
Yeah.
He loomed over everything. So, there is some resonance here. And I do think that there is some interesting dialogue and moments that deal maybe at a surface level of the fascist ideals and how they are, kind of distilled down to young minds. And breaking through that is very hard. And even Jojo, he kind of seems to somebody who knows right from wrong. And so his interactions with the girl that he meets, that's hiding out in the attic, are interesting moments. And you also get to see kind of just how young jealousy comes into play, because she supposedly has another boyfriend who's off fighting in the resistance or something. And he's very jealous of that fact and seems to hate this guy and wants to punish her almost because she has this other boyfriend, because he's a little boy who's in love with a much older girl.
He's got a puppy crush.
Yeah. And then even when the Germans lose and things are going, and then again, this is another movie where I don't want to spend a movie thinking about the plot holes too much, but there's a weird thing where the mom is, executed, but then I guess he's sort of just allowed to live in the house for a while where no one's checking in, and she, they've got this other girl that they think is a sister, so they leave him alone. It seems very convenient. I don't know.
It does seem very convenient, but we also have to remember this is at the end of the war, and things are sort of collapsing and falling apart, and people are deserting, and the machinery is breaking down. And so I think I'll give the film that plot hole.
Okay, but something happens. The girl's wondering what happened, and Jojo feels that he'll be all alone and that she's going to leave him. So he tells her kind of a horrible lie that the Germans won or something. And because he wants to keep her there. And it's a kind of a tough moment. Thankfully, it doesn't linger too long.
So here's the difference in the book.
That's what I'm wondering. Yes. Tell me.
In the book, he continues to lie to her into adulthood and keeps her locked in the attic.
Oh, that's so creepy.
Yes. It doesn't have the redemptive ending where they're dancing in the streets and where he, becomes a good person again. No, he's actually in the book is sort of permanently damaged by fascism, and there is no breaking point.
So, what does it like the end? Does she escape or anything? Or
I don't know actually.
oh, okay. I'm like, this is horrifying.
But yeah, no, it's horrifying. It's really dark, and it just shows how he's sort of mentally crippled by fascism. Whereas this, I feel like he's the kid who couldn't kill the rabbit kind of for the whole movie. And because it's a coming of age story, it has to be about personal growth. And so he has to outgrow his fanaticism, and he does, and finds empathy and sympathy and love, which sort of cures his hateful heart. But I think that, I don't know. I mean, I think that it lets him off the hook a little bit easily at the end.
I guess what's fascinating is how do you, read a story like that and decide, hey, we should make this into a movie, but let's do it, I mean, I can understand why they would Hollywood ending it, but it's just weird that subject matter would be something they would even look to adapt.
Well, and can you Hollywood ending the Holocaust, right? I don't know that you and Life is Beautiful does that. I think that the great dictator actually says in the final scene, the final speech is sort of like, actually, comedy is not up to the task here, and Chaplin breaks the fourth wall and gives this speech directly to the audience, and that's sort of saying, actually, sincerity comes in. We can't just have a happy ending here where the Jewish barber and the girl sort of go off into the sunset. We can't have that because that's not realistic.
It's a weird movie to talk about, the mixed bag for me. But, look, the fact is it wouldn't be worth even discussing if not for the fact that what we've seen here is how hatred in our own country can sort of rally so many that they would put someone in charge who has no business being in charge of a country in order to hopefully get rid of immigrants, right? He's another
Yeah, to get rid of immigrants, to cleanse the country somehow, to make it strong and pure and all that. Part of my issue with this movie is we don't see a lot of the other fascist ideology like the nationalism and the glorification. Well, we see some of the glorification of death, but there are certain aspects of fascism that are sort of on the back burner, and on the front burner is anti-Semitism and hatred and racism. And I think that that's definitely one of the sort of motivating passions of fascism, but I think it sort of ignores some of the other aspects. And yes, Jojo is brainwashed, right? He's actually a good kid who's been brainwashed, as opposed to those other kids that are at the Hitler Youth that want him to kill the rabbit. They're actually evil killers. And he never is that. He's always a good kid.
at heart. Yeah. I mean, and again, you can see that Scarlett Johansson says this to somebody at one point where she's just like, she knows he's a good kid somewhere, but he's fanatical, right?
He's a fanatic, yeah, and even Elsa says, you're not a Nazi. That's not who you are, and you're just a kid playing a Nazi. And to me, it lets him off the hook a little bit. I feel like that's my issue with the movie, is that it's sort of a simple solution to hate, and it also focuses more on the individual as opposed to the whole system that creates people like this. And even the Sam Rockwell character, I feel like is, his heart's not in it, and JoJo's heart's not in it. And it would be a very different kind of movie if JoJo's heart was in it from the beginning, if he did kill the rabbit and takes that guilt with him forward and is sort of destroyed by it. But instead, it kind of lets him off the hook a little bit. And I think it does it because it doesn't want to give us anything too heavy, because it's trying to keep this sort of whimsical view of a child looking at fascism.
So, yeah, again, this movie isn't something that I think that we were probably going to discuss, at least at this stage, but we'd heard a lot of people say, oh, well, what about Jojo Rabbit? And so for us, I think it's important that we've talked about all these other movies. And then, we take a look at this kind of film and say, well, what does it really have to say about fascism other than that base level, hatred is bad and love is good.
Yeah.
Okay. So we get that message in the movie, but I think there's a little bit more to it. So hopefully with other movies that we're going to discuss this season, we'll dive into that topic in a little bit of a better package.
This movie doesn't give me a lot of insights about fascism other than it's motivated by hatred. And which is definitely part of it, but I think it doesn't really teach us that much about fascism. It sort of shows us how it's potentially evil and corrupting to our own souls, but it doesn't really get into the situation, the context, the structure that creates this. And so to me, it doesn't provide a lot of insight and ends up at the end of the day for me being a little too cute.
Well, you will not get an argument there for me. So
at the end of the day, it doesn't have a whole lot to tell us about fascism. It sort of uses it as an environment to tell this story about this kid's personal evolution, but it doesn't really enlighten us much more. It doesn't present much of a model of resistance other than survival and learning not to hate. And I think that that's, you can't really say, well, if we had just introduced the Nazis to more Jews, it wouldn't have happened, because I think that that's naive. It's much worse than that. And it sort of ignores also the banality of evil, which is, like Eichmann just scheduling trains and stuff, as opposed to being motivated by hate in every action.
In this film, it's looking a little bit at end stage fascism. So where fascism was on the failure, and this is sort of the loose ends getting tied up. And then, what we really haven't done a lot of, maybe even if at all, but I think we will be trying to maybe get into this at some point, hopefully with at least a movie or two this season, is what happens after, which I think can be fascinating. There are some films that deal with, either the guilt or the lingering when fascism has failed, but what's next?
It leaves this wound on the country, on the culture, on individuals. And it is traumatizing, and it changes people, and it lingers for generations. And there are certainly German films and European films that dealt with that aftermath and how that, because there were a lot of Nazis who were still in government after denazification kind of failed. And it was a lingering part of their society.
Yeah. So again, that's not going to be probably what we have coming up next, but we'll be looking for what we can offer there. But again, hopefully, even if we weren't biggest fans of this movie, it's okay if you were. It can work on many levels. But we're trying to cover all areas on our program, Fascism on Film, which you can find on fascismonfilm.com. I'm James Kent. With me, as always, is Teal Minton, and that's all we've got.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.